prioritize your mental health, and we go by the definition, then our mental health is just as important as the prostate that Dr. Gregg just spoke of, and our hearts, as Nurse Joan just spoke of. And we are seeing some things like we've never seen before with our mental health. Even last night, looking at the news, it saddened my heart to see yet more shootings, more fighting downtown, camera on somebody with their pants hanging down, and fighting and shooting and killing. We are in a mental health crisis. And we had been warned. If you've been following and listening, they've been saying, when this is over, the mental health crisis is what we're going to be facing. So we're perishing for lack of knowledge, because are we really listening? They warned us that this would happen. So I want to share with you, as a part of my presentation, 2 real stories that happen. They're happening to us. Well, 3 stories, because one will be my own. One of the stories, I was on the phone talking to a friend, and before I gave you priority, I want to give you the definition for mental health and a mental health crisis, because that's what we're in. A mental health crisis is any situation in which a person's behavior puts them at risk of hurting themselves or hurting others, and or it prevents them from being able to care for themselves or function effectively in the community. So we've got a mental health crisis. So let me share with you, before we take the panel, a story that really happened, because Dr. Kim wanted to know, do you all know what to do in a crisis? Do you recognize when someone is in a crisis? Sister Nurse Jones spoke of her brother. Well, this don't feel like indigestion. This feels like something else. So when we're listening and hearing people, whether they're our family members, our students, whoever they are, we need to know, what is it that we're hearing? Is this person in a crisis? So I'm talking on the phone one day to my mentor, and all of a sudden she cut the conversation short and said, I gotta go. I just got a crazy text. So we ended the call. Later, when she got back to me, she told me what the text was that she received. The text said, I wonder if the tree will hold me. The person on the end that sent that text was looking out the window in their home at the backyard tree and wondering, can I hang myself on the tree? Will the branches of the tree hold me? She recognized something is wrong. In the middle of COVID, she drove and did a drive-by. This is when they were telling us, mask up, don't go in nobody's house. She masked up, she did a drive-by. Why? There was someone in a mental health crisis, contemplating suicide. And I will give you the signs and symptoms when we have our panel discussion. When she got to the house, masked up and protected, because that's what they told us to do, she asked 2 very important questions. What's going on, and how may I help you? Turns out the person who sent the text was living with her elderly mother. Dr. Greg just told us that baby boomer age. That mother had dementia. The mother never slept. So the daughter never slept because she was afraid if I go to sleep, mama gonna get out the house. We just heard the lady in the news this week who got out, was lost for many days. What did the mentor do? She put them both in the bed together, and they got some sleep. Crisis ended, lives saved. That sounds so simple, but she was listening, and she did something. And that's what we have to do in this crisis. The next story is about myself. Early in the COVID-19 crisis, I was sitting in my very cluttered room that my son, he's left the house, the room still ain't clean. And I'm sitting in there watching all of those newscasts where they're talking about black and brown people, people that look like me, my age, dying. And I spiraled down into a very deep depression. I was already receiving therapy pre-COVID, and I reached out for help. I called my therapist and said, I'm not doing well. I need more time. At that time, I was getting help once a month, and we changed me to every other week. I still wasn't doing well. And now I talk to my therapist every week, every Thursday at 5 p.m. because I needed the extra support. I am anti-stigma. I am not ashamed that I have to get help. I am not ashamed to tell others, get you some help. My very first therapist years ago told me, if you can get yourself healthy, you may help your son. And my son is doing a lot better now because he has seen me get the help I need to be a better single mother of an adult. So I want to encourage you when we talk about the signs at the panel discussion to please leave here. The takeaway is remove the stigma and the shame from getting the help we need. And I will close with this. Our children are in a crisis. We get a text in the middle of the day. All day long, we got prayer chains going where we're praying for young adults and teenagers. During the school day, a black male student in Inglewood leaves out of the class, sits in the bathroom, looks out the window, mask, hood, afraid, scared, traumatized. These are the issues that our children are dealing with. Another such text comes. The girl jumps from the 3rd floor in the school building, desperate, not for learning, but to die. Jumped from the 3rd floor, landed on the 2nd floor, face down. Now you've got more issues than the suicide attempt because you've damaged your face, possibly broken bones, but it was a cry out for help. We must learn to listen. We must learn to know what we're looking at, and we must have an ear to hear. That is what I want to leave you with on today as we prepare for the panel. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nurse Lonnie. Our last speaker before the panel is going to be Kevin Blumenberg. He is with the People's Lobby, and he's going to speak about the need, Nurse Lonnie spoke, for the mental health services in the southern suburbs.
Thank you, and thank y'all for having me. As I sat here and I listened to all of the information that was being put out today, it just made me realize even more and more that we really have to get in front of this issue, this mental health issue. It's all about us as individuals to have the knowledge about what's going on, to make sure that we out here and we're sharing it. Oftentimes when we think about the violence that's going on in our communities and we think about a lot of the mental health issues that's going on, we forget that in order to change a lot of these things, that first we have to interrupt it. We have to get in front of it. And sometimes the interruption comes through new information that's being shared, like a lot of the information that was shared with us today. What I want to say is that in our communities, oftentimes our people suffer and they perish because of lack of knowledge, which was spoke on earlier today. So it's important that we continue to share this information with each other and get it out there and be consistent. Don't stop, because you may be able to save somebody else's life. And so that's really the goal. When we think about the police and how they respond to mental health crisis throughout our community, oftentimes it results in violence and it results in people being incarcerated. And that's something that we want to be able to stop. I feel like in order for you to be able to conquer something, you have to be able to discern it. You have to be able to understand it. And oftentimes, our people really don't understand what's really going on in the communities. We don't know to be vigilant or to look for a lot of the mental health issue or signs that people have, whether we're talking about prostate, whether we're talking about heart disease, or we're talking about just mental health issues overall. Out here in the south suburbs, we only have 3 Cook County health clinics. Only 3 throughout the south suburbs. And there's such a big gap in between the locations of these 3 hospitals or these 3 mental health clinics that if you don't have a car, then it may take you hours dealing with public transportation in order to get to these facilities to get the help that you need. And that's something that has to stop. That's something that we want to stop. And when you get to these places, they only have 1 mental health person on staff. So we have all of this land out here in the south suburbs, all of the people throughout these communities that are suffering from mental health issues, yet we only have 3 clinics and 1 mental health individual on staff to try to service all of these individuals. That is something as well that has to stop and needs to change. We have to interrupt that by making sure that we're getting information out there about that. If we can get this information out there, what we do is this. We interrupt, we change the behavior with new information, and then we're able to change community norms. TPL, which is the People's Lobby, SOUL, and the Budget for Black Lives Coalition are working with the Cook County to try to develop our alternative 911 program for individuals who suffer from mental health issues. And what we envision is this, is that when the call center at 911 receives a call about somebody who may be suffering from mental health, that we have a staff member right there on deck with them to help to support them and walk them through whatever it is that they need in order that we help the individuals, that we service them, and that we're not unnecessarily witnessing people in our communities get incarcerated or even lose their lives because they're suffering from mental health issues. We want you to get, we want everybody to get the care that they need. We want everybody to get the care that they need, especially if you're suffering from mental health issues. We are in the business of saving lives, and we are in the business of trying to interrupt a lot of these things that are going on so that the people in our community to get all the help that they need and continue to move forward with a healthy life. If you look around you, you look up here on the wall, what it says, health and wellness fair. Lives get better. And that's what we're about. We're about making sure that people's lives get better. So I encourage everybody to continue to share the information that they're sharing and continue to come out and try to support us as we move forward and get in front of the mental health crisis that's going on throughout our communities. It's important that we do that. Don't stop talking, don't stop sharing, and don't stop believing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Next, we're going to bring up our pastor, Isaac B. Green. So receive, Pastor.
Amen. Let's say amen for all that valuable information that we've heard dealing with heart issues, dealing with prostate, and then dealing with mental wellness. Amen. And where we all have a responsibility, I think in all of this, is holding each other accountable for what we're doing and what we're not doing as it relates to our health and our wellness. Because too many times in our community, we become very reactive. When we sit by and we see each other suffer, in pain, and ignoring what everybody else sees, but we're not doing anything about it. And so it truly has to become a community effort in turning around the story in our communities where we could be more proactive in taking care of our health, from the diet to the exercise to going to the doctor, getting our regular routine screenings that can identify issues a long time. My own mother has dementia, and we were up talking to a neurologist, and they did an MRI scan, and one of the things they found was, because she's a very vibrant individual, but what we found was that she was having all these mini strokes, and they're not related to diabetes because she doesn't have that. It's not related to bad diet, anything like that. But this may be what? Genetic. All right? So because we took the step to go and talk to a professional, and now we know what kind of led to what she's dealing with, guess what I must do? I need to go get that test right now. Because the same thing, that's her DNA, right? I understand my dad's health issues. He had heart issues. I can't ignore it. He talked about prostate. He talked about even with colon cancer. My dad got diagnosed with colon cancer. He overcame it. But ever since I'm 30 years old, I forced my doctor to give me those colon tests at an early age. And so we, as an African-American community, we have to become the voice in our families, the voice among our friends. I have a lot of different stories. I had a friend that we used to just call crazy. Call crazy. Well, that same individual that we was calling crazy tried to take his life and his family life. All because we were uneducated to the symptoms. Okay, we're uneducated. We call it crazy, but it wasn't crazy. It was actually an illness. And nobody spoke up to try to help this individual. But now we're in the age of information. We know a whole lot more. We cannot ignore the signs and the symptoms. And we cannot be so faith-bound that we ignore the reality of what we're going through. Because that's another issue. Because then we say, God gonna fix it. God got my back. But I tell people, God gives us facts. Facts not to ignore, but facts to deal with. Because our signs and symptoms are not going anywhere. We must face it. We must deal with it. And so I'm just so honored that we have healthcare professionals taking time out to come and to share this valuable information, because it's our responsibility as a faith-based community to be all about the truth. All right? And we all have to deal with the truth. Somebody said the truth will set us free. And so I just want to share that as we prepare for the panel. So I'm going to turn it back over to our great MC today, Sister Michelle, and she'll introduce our panel.
Thank you, Pastor. So I would like to ask our 4 speakers to come back up and begin our panel, and just remind everybody that we'll have raffles. We have our farmers market outside, and we are also going to have health vendors. We're going to have Advocate come out. We are also going to have Oak Street Health. We have body sculpting by Body by MC. Family Christian Health for COVID-19 vaccines and vaccination. We have the CAN Academy, Coalition of African American Nurses, Compassion Care for Life Church, and we have Natural Vines LLC for natural products. So please, if you're able, please come out to Life Church. So our panel is seated. If we have any questions that we would like to begin with our panel.
Hey, hey, Reverend.
We have a mic.
Testing.
Hello. My understanding is that in addition to having mental health care professionals in the centers, that there's money allocated to have mental health practitioners going on calls with the police for disturbances. That's been allocated to Cook County. Is that correct? But we don't know yet, or the thought is that much of it is going to the suburbs out in Cook County that are not south. Is that correct? Or has that been changed?
Testing. Hello? Well, I can't give you any specific facts on that. I know that the People's Lobby, SOUL, and the Budget for Black Lives Coalition are working together with the Cook County in order to develop this program. And what we envision is that, as you said, that we will have a professional on deck that can do a walkthrough and help provide people at the center with the information that they need in order to give the people who may be suffering from mental health issues what it is that they need in order to get through it. We also envision that you have a social worker that will be able to walk through this with them. And then we also envision that they can do the wraparound services later on. A lot of money is being pushed in a lot of different areas, but what we really want to focus on is making sure that the money get pushed in the areas where it's needed the most so that we can service the people who are suffering from mental health issues, and especially out here in the south suburbs, because as I mentioned earlier, there are only 3 clinics out here. You have one in Fort Heights, one in Robbins, and one in Blue Islands. And the problem with that is that if you don't have a car, you have to rely on transportation. And sometimes transportation may take you hours to get there. And so that's the sad part about it, is that you may be suffering from an issue and have a concern and need to get to these clinics immediately, but don't have the transportation to get there because there's such big gaps. And then the other crisis is that when you get there, you only have one mental health individual on deck.
So what can we as churches do to ensure or help support the appropriate allocation of the funds?
We can continue to have these conversations and make sure that we're educating the people about what's going on in the communities and the need for it. And that's part of the reason why I'm here, because we're looking to hear from the people. We want to hear from the people about what it is that they feel that they need in order to make this system better, and in order to make sure that the people who are suffering from mental health issues needs get met. I don't think that it's fair for people on the outside to be able to make decisions about things that are going to affect you in your community or in our communities. I don't think that people who don't have the experience or the insight about what's going on with mental health can make accurate decisions about what's best for you. So that's why it's important that we hear from the people in the communities so that we can go out here and make sure that we're developing everything it is that we need in order to bring the people's vision into fruition.
Thank you.
Good morning. I have a question for concerning the prostate. So what are some of the preventive measures and also supplements that would help keep you with a healthy prostate?
So there's only really one, as far as preventative is concerned, and it's not really preventative, but there is some legitimate research that suggests that saw palmetto is a good treatment if you have symptoms of an enlarged prostate. But outside of that, there is no vitamin, no herbal product that you can take that would prevent any prostate issues. Not that's been medically researched anyway, let me put it that way. So it's really just a matter of, again, making sure that you're getting screened. Generally speaking, a healthy lifestyle, exercise, diet, that kind of stuff, just in general will lower your overall cancer risk. But there's not, and to answer your question, there's no specific preventative thing that you can do as far as preventing prostate cancer or even symptoms of prostate disease.
Okay, thank you. I have one more. I have another question for the mental health. How do you deal with? Because at some point in my life, I experienced it. I don't even know how I got past it, but I noticed it in my daughter. How you can do a certain thing, and you have the skills to do certain things, but mentally, you feel inept, even though you have the skills, or you suffer from somewhat of a low self-esteem, even though you know you have a certain talents to do certain things, but you just can't do it because your self-esteem is preventing you. So I'm trying to figure out, because I suffer from that. I just believe God just delivered me. I'm not sure how it happened, but I'm looking at it in my daughter, my youngest daughter right now, trying to figure out, what can be done to help her.
How old is your daughter?
She's 24.
24?
Yes.
So I brought this book. I want to read something to you and share with you. And I'm recommending this book as a resource. The name of the book is Black Pain by Terry Williams. She's a licensed social worker. And she wrote this book because she says we're in pain, but we're acting like we're not. And she addresses some issues about young adults and teens in this book. And so I just had the children on my heart, as you just heard. She said, before 1980, there was no official diagnosis of childhood depression. Mental health professionals didn't even have a category for it. And with the society so blind to depression overall, we regular folks sure weren't seeing it in our kids. The basic reason for that particular blindness goes way beyond our ideas about mental health. It starts in the ways we as society devalue children. And I just shared that because you sound like you value your daughter, but I think the bigger picture and the point I'm trying to make, and Ms. Williams was making, is that our children show different behaviors, and somebody else can allude to this, that we don't always understand, whether it's low self-esteem, fear, anxiety, depression, a lot of different things. As the parent, you keep telling her she's beautiful, she can do all things. You got past yours, so she can. But be open, sir, to that she might need more than what you needed. She might need to talk to someone to say, why am I not functioning or doing what I really have the capability of doing, but I'm unable to? Why? What is that barrier? What is the problem? How can we help her be a better person? How can we help her flourish? That might mean talking to someone else. When my son was about your daughter's age and even younger, because I was getting help, I was having issues. My husband at the time, left the house when he was in his senior year, so of high school. And there's never a good time for the man of the house to leave, but I would certainly suggest that the senior year is not a good year. So obviously he really struggled in college in his early 20s, and it was when he got the extra support I recommended to him, because I was getting the help. Son, you might want to get some help. I understand why you're feeling this way. You've been abandoned, we've been through a lot, we're depressed, but I believe you can do better than what you're doing. Flunking out of college is not the answer. And when he got the extra help, he's 37 now, completed his master's and teaching. So he did need the extra support. And me being open, anti-stigma, I'm stressing it today, that it's okay for, you can pray some things away. Yeah, we're prayer warriors. But God put counsel in other people to help us. So be open to that.
Well, I do have one more if you guys don't mind. In terms of heart disease, what I've been noticing is a lot of young people are developing heart disease. Do you think that one of the contributing factors is, I love the dollar store, but too many times, to save some money, we're buying low-level products, and I see kids are eating a lot of the stuff out of like the dollar stores, and does that contribute to their health demise?
We are seeing a lot younger kids with heart disease. Childhood obesity is a big thing right now. Children don't go outside. They're staying at home. They're watching TV. They're playing video games, and actually, it can be scary to go outside. It's dangerous because of certain aspects of society that my sister, Nurse Patsy, has alluded to. There is so much violence and anger because of mental health issues that kids don't go outside to play. They're not burning off that energy. I think that when some of us were younger, we would go outside as soon as we had breakfast, and you may not see us until dinner time. Kids don't feel free to do that right now. So encouraging healthy activity in children and coming against those things that factor in to childhood obesity is a start. Right now, with the economic situation being what it is, healthy food is expensive. All food is expensive. You specifically mentioned the dollar store. Some communities don't have a grocery store. We're going to the dollar store for our food. It is possible to find healthy food at the dollar store. For instance, canned vegetables. You might say, well, I've heard canned vegetables are salty. Yes, they are, but there are certain canned vegetables that if all you can afford is to go to the dollar store, you can actually rinse canned vegetables under running water to add those items to the diet. It's when you see things running in families, like I've heard people say, oh, you don't have to take my blood pressure because high blood pressure runs in my family. No, bad health habits run in the family. So if children are seeing their parents eat unhealthy, if they're seeing their parents continually eat fried foods, but not even putting vegetables and fruits into the diet, that's why children are having more problems with heart disease. We're seeing it more and more. But I do attribute that Two, what's going on in our streets? Children are not as active. Children are watching what their parents eat. Economics is a factor. There's something called social determinants of health. There's lots of factors going on into our communities that don't allow us to be as healthy as in other communities. We don't have fresh food. We don't have fresh vegetables. We have to walk too far to the grocery store. Sometimes we may even have to get on the bus to go to the grocery store. So the point I'm trying to make is when we're seeing children as young as 5 being obese, it's because of what's going on in the home, and we're seeing that more and more than ever before. Again, we should not allow our children to play video games all day. If it's not safe to go outside, exercise in the home. If it's not safe to walk around the neighborhood with your children. If they go to the playground, supervise it. And again, you can exercise in the home. You can eat healthy in the home because that's where it starts. If it starts in the home with the parents, then it'll trickle down to healthier kids. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. I have a question for Nurse Jones and Dr. Smith, kind of combined. My best friend passed away at the age of 56. He was a triathlete. He was actually jogging on the trail out here on Volmer Road, and he had a heart issue that he didn't know about. But I do know, we've been friends since I was 16, that he wasn't a big advocate of going to the doctor. He looked very healthy. We thought he was very healthy. He did everything. But how can, two-part question, what, for Dr. Smith, what as women or partners have brothers and husbands, how can we encourage men to go to the doctor? And for the nurse, even though people are, seemingly very healthy and things like that, can you just speak again about the signs of maybe heart disease?
So what was your question for me? I'm sorry.
So how can we encourage men
Yes.
to go to the doctor? Or what advice could you
I mean, at the end of the day, you can't make anybody do anything. So that's
Correct.
the first thing I would say. So I'm not an advocate of harping or pressing or, because if anything, it may make your significant other less likely. I mean, all you can do is be supportive. All you can do is occasionally mention. All you can, yeah. I mean, that's a hard question because again, you cannot control anybody. But I would say, as in anything else, you don't want to continue to harp on it because that can be counterproductive. Yeah.
Men are conditioned and socialized to be strong, to be macho, to just be, there's never anything wrong. And it's hard for men to say, I'm not feeling well because I'm supposed to be strong. We, at our church, we have, before the pandemic, we had Wellness Weekend. And we would screen our congregation for high blood pressure. And I remember something that always sticks out in my mind. I saw a young father with 3 children in tow, like little stair steps, maybe 4, 3, and 2 years old. And I said, brother, come on over here so I can check your blood pressure. And his response to me was, if I have high blood pressure, I don't want to know about it. And I said, sir, if you have high blood pressure and it goes untreated, you're going to know about it. It's going to present itself with a stroke or a heart attack. It's not going away. Not knowing Sometimes we've all heard that saying, what you don't know won't hurt you. If your health is out of whack and you don't know it, it will hurt you. It will hurt you. So encourage, especially men, and I think that a lot of this keeps going back to mental health. Men need to know that it's okay to show vulnerability. Give the men in your life permission to be vulnerable. And if men feel they're vulnerable, or they feel it's okay to show that they're vulnerable, I think that's a start in getting men to get screened, getting men to say, hey, I better get this checked out. But a lot of it is men feel the need to be strong and to be like I'm invincible, there's nothing wrong. And that's why men's life expectancy is not as long as women's life expectancy. And I think a lot of that is because men feel the need to always be strong. So encourage the men in your life to be vulnerable. Say, and just make them feel guilty. Say, I love you. Can you do this for me? Can you do this for me? I need you to be healthy. Yes, you're the man of the house. Yes, we depend on you, but I need you to be healthy. I need you to be screened. High blood pressure in early stages, you can go years without knowing that you have high blood pressure. But when something happens, you'll know it. There's no such thing as, if I have something, I don't want to know about it. So screening is the key, because you will know about it. And it's so dangerous for men because they want to be strong. They don't want to show themselves as vulnerable.
Thank you. Yes, absolutely.
Sometimes it's easier for men to receive the message if it's coming from somebody else rather than somebody that they love, that they're sharing their life with, because they may not want to be seen as being vulnerable or weak. I know that I've been accused of it in my relationship with my lady. She'll tell me something 3-4 times, and I may not be able to receive it. I may not be able to hear it. And then somebody else will come right along and say the same thing that she just said, just paraphrase it. And I'm like, oh, okay, I get it. And then she gets highly upset. So I think sometimes it's good for men to hear it coming from a brother, a friend, another male figure, because they may be suffering from the same thing. And a lot of it is associated with shame. So I created an acronym for shame, and shame stands for self-hate affecting my existence. Sometimes we're prideful, and we're seen as being the strong individuals, and we think that we can always push through it. And sometimes it may be a credit even to our faith. But nevertheless, I think that you continue to have the conversations, continue to plant them seeds, and continue to use the power of persuasion as just being intelligent, strong women, and plant that seed. Keep having that conversation with them and making sure that they continue to have conversations with other males, because sometimes if I may feel comfortable if I know that he's suffering through the same thing and he has more information about it than me, and then we start dialoguing and talking, I'm like, oh, okay, all right, now I feel more comfortable going to make sure that I get my needs met versus me hearing it from my wife or my significant others, because they may just be harping on it. And I'll be like, hey, look, I'm paying bills, going to school, taking care of the kids, and now you talking about some go to the hospital. So continue to have those conversations with him, and hopefully he has another male friend that he feels comfortable with that's a little bit more educated than him about it, and can get him on the right track to go get the help that he needs.
Thank you. I
You're welcome.
appreciate that. Thank you. Do we have any back here? We'll get your mic.
What would be the defining reason that a mental health facility would keep a person who other family members have recommended they need some help. And I ask this because I have a family member 15 years ago. I convinced her sisters, she's my aunt, to take her to a mental health facility to be evaluated because she has, over the past 45 years, we've watched a progression of mental issues, and now she's sleeping in her car. She believes people are following her, cutting up her clothes. I hear the same types of things that different people in different states, different compartments of my life say the same things. So I know there's something there. It's a condition, but the mental health facility released her because she didn't want to receive treatment. So what is the defining rule of thumb that a family can depend on if they rally up the energy and the the wherewithal to try to get a family member help? I personally, 30 years ago, stood between her and a family member and a butcher knife. She's always talking about harming other people, killing other people, but the police don't seem to take it seriously, and neither did the mental health facility, who was given all this information 15 years ago, and now it's progressed. So what can families do if they know they have a family member? You hear things in the news all the time, and people always say, well, she had reported this to so-and-so. But how can we really make a difference? And do you have those answers?
Well, I'll start out. You had a lot packed into that. First of all, you said that you as and let me just say, never stand between someone with a knife, because we had in our prayer group someone stood in between and that person got stabbed and ended up losing a kidney. So I hear what you're saying, but just keep yourself, prioritize your mental health by keeping yourself safe. You mentioned that as a family, you all had her taken to a facility. And I heard in that explanation that she eventually signed herself out or did not want to stay. Well, that's kind of what Dr. Gregg was just saying. We can preach, urge, cry, highly recommend, pray, and all those things. And at the end of the day, there is something called AMA, Against Medical Advice, whereby people sign themselves out. And Dr. Gregg, you can help me with that. And that's the reality that we as healthcare professionals deal with all the time. And all we're going to do is write in our note, our progress note, patient advised to stay. Patient advised to get treatment. Patient advised to follow this treatment plan, and patient decided at 8:04 p.m. they are leaving. They are signing themselves out. You as the family, you all rallied around her. Of course her symptoms are worse. She's receiving no treatment. This is what no treatment looks like. It looks like paranoia, afraid somebody's tearing up my stuff. It looks like severe isolation. I'm living in my car. It's all those things you described. Why? Because she is not being treated. Her condition is worse, and it will continue to worsen until something happens that she feels her mental health is a priority, that she can. I started out saying prioritize your mental health. Her mental health is not a priority to her. It's a priority to you all. That's why you standing in between the knife and all of that, because you see that there's a problem, but she doesn't see it. And so we want her to get to the point where she can see it as well.
I mean, I think it all as Nurse Patsy already basically said, again, it boils down to you cannot make a grown person do anything. And what happens is, if you have a family member with significant mental illness, sometimes it's harder on the family than it is on the individual going through. Because, again, you're trying to make somebody do something that's good for them that they don't want to do. So it's not an easy answer to that question. I mean, as far as forcing somebody, now you're talking about legal stuff. Now you're talking about petitioning the court, that kind of thing. But outside of a legal process, it's nothing you can do other than pray and encourage.
And when you call the police or whatever, we know, as this young man pointed out so eloquently, we know when they arrive that it could go west real fast for us. So to be able to articulate to the people coming to help, Auntie Joan has had a problem for years. We just want her to get mental health support. We're not trying to do a funeral right now. And use that kind of language to let them know we're not that family. We want help. We recognize it doesn't look good right now, but help us. This is mental illness we're dealing with, or mental health challenge. We want to use mental health and not ill, so that they, and that's just kind of changing the narrative and the vocabulary.
The other thing I think is important to mention is that you don't want to make yourself sick because somebody else is sick. I see it all the time where, individuals are stressing themselves out. They're making themselves depressed. They're making themselves anxious because they can't control another person. And at some point, you have to get to the point where you're saying, you know what, I've done all I can do. I need to back up off this because it's affecting my health now. Okay, and it's just not for me. It could be anything, not necessarily a relative of mental illness. But anytime we get into a situation where we're trying to, I keep saying the same thing, trying to make somebody do something, that's when you get into problems that's when you get problems yourself in dealing with that situation. And it hurts, it's unfortunate. In some instances, it may not be possible to detach, like if you're married to the person, for example. But again, as much as it is possible, you have to not get yourself wrapped up in their pathology, in other words, because it does you no good at the end of the day. And they're still sick. Now you're sick too.
Let me just give another example. Thank you, Dr. Gregg. When I was married and our marriage got in trouble, I really suffered and struggled with, I think that's when I got my first mental health diagnosis. I developed panic attacks and depression. Later, with the therapist I have now, post-traumatic stress disorder. And you hit it on the head, Dr. Gregg. I all but stood on my head, begged and pleaded. We need some help. We need some help. Who can you talk to? We need some help. And I don't know if I made the situation worse, but I just knew we were in trouble. Son had been killed, a lot of trauma we experienced. But where I'm going with the story is I reached out and got help for myself. When you are dealing with someone who will not get the help, as Dr. Gregg just said, I became sick. I was depressed. I had panic attacks. I had insomnia. I was nervous. My blood pressure became out of control. I did a job on myself trying to get him to get the help we needed after that middle son was killed. 2 more were killed. We never got trauma help. We never got grief support. But I heard Pastor Joanne Long on the radio said, wives, especially those of you married in the ministry, get yourself the help, because the pastor, who is the husband, is going to refuse help. So I say to you here that are dealing with that, get the help for yourself. As Dr. Gregg just said, and you're looking at somebody who went through it. I was a wreck trying to get him to get in. But when she said, "Wife, you go," I took off running. And it was the best decision I ever made for myself and my mental health. And I'm in a much better place.
Amen.
Just co-sign on what Dr. Greg Smith said about the relationship between physical disease and mental disease. For myself, ever since I was in my 20s, I always had a mass in my breast, but it was always benign, right? So every time I get a mammogram, it's this mass, and every time they want to check it, and every time it's benign. So I got to the point where I just have a mass in my brain. That's it. And but at some point, I got very disappointed, like extremely disappointed by one of my children, and disappointment, it turned to anger, turned to bitterness, and all of a sudden, after these years of you have this mass that's benign, this bitterness creeped into a manifestation in my body, and all of a sudden I have stage 4 breast cancer. And I say that to say, I often refer to it as dis-ease, because I believe that my mental state, the bitterness and the stress and the disappointment and wanting him to do something, and I had no control over it, right? Because how many know you parent grown folks differently, right? So having no control over it manifested as this dis-ease in my body that was potentially fatal. So we need to, I guess his point was, realize that you have to let it go, or you can't make anybody do anything. You can only control yourself. But what you can do is pray and stay in the gap for others, but that's all. You can't do anything about them. And I just want to say you were on point with that. That's all.
So I have a
Good morning. I just have a question about how do you go about helping the children that are being bullied in school?
Well, I currently work in the school, and I've had a very honorable career as a school nurse. Take bullying very seriously, and I don't know if you're the parent of that child or the grandparent or whatever. Go to the school and say that my child is being bullied. You want to bring the child with you. You want to call names in that office with the principal. Johnny is bullying me. What did he do? What did he say? You call names. You call the bully out. And the schools have a responsibility, and every school now that we know suicide is related to bullying. A lot of the kids that have suffered in silence and gone on with the bullying and all like that, those children typically come home after a really bad day of bullying, and they usually take their lives. We're not using terminology like he or she committed suicide. We don't want a commitment to that. We want prevention, and we want the terminology to be they died by suicide. But we are doing everything we can. That school should be behind you 100%. They need to show you in writing the policy on bullying. The other parent or parents need to become involved. The village needs to get together because you're trying to save a life. It is taken very serious. The person that is the victim becomes more and more closed in, more and more sad. They then go from sadness to shame as if it's their fault. It's a big deal. Go in, armed up, ready. I want answers. We want to know what you're doing to protect Johnny, and get their parent, whatever has to be done, do it to protect that child.
Thank you. So I want to have a question for mental health prioritizing. I know I've been in therapy probably the last 20 years myself, off and on. But over the last couple years, I was referred to a black female therapist by a good friend of mine, and it really shifted everything for me as a black woman. So I wanted to talk about how can we as people of color really find the support mental health services that will speak to us and the issues that we have.
Well, you want that or me? Well, my very first therapist was a black female. Back in 2003, that's when I started therapy, so count those years. I've been in and out a lot. The problem is, and other people on the panel can probably attest to this, the problem is, it is one of the areas, black psychology, Dr. Gregg and others on the panel, the field is not growing. It is not growing. The research shows that it isn't. The people going to school to study it, they don't look like us. So therefore, you're going to be hard pressed to find a black or brown therapist, because the few that are out there, my therapist now is a black male. He's in his 70s. And I have referred so many people to him during COVID. He told me, Ms. Smith, I can't take any more. I got half the family, we all messed up. I was like, I think you need to go see, And so he now is referring them to other people. So what am I saying? You're gonna be hard pressed. You blessed you got in. I'm blessed I got one. I had a black female. She was what I needed at that time because I was married and we were supposed to be doing couples counseling, and that turned out to be something else. But you can navigate. They do have, and I do have a resource that I'd be more than happy to share with you all. There is blacktherapist.com that you can go and look. You can ask word of mouth, those kinds of things as far as a referral goes. And shopping for a therapist, black or otherwise, is just like when we look for our primary care physician like Dr. Gregg here. He has a clientele of patients / clients, So
thank you.
Just keep looking, but don't be surprised that you don't have this big laundry list of names out there, because the field is not growing. That is something we can encourage our young people, that we need mental health providers that look like us. And for those that are interested, you might want to consider encouraging them to get their master's in mental health, so that we have more counselors that look like us.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, what do you do if you look at blacktherapist.com and someone's dealing with the financial part of it because of the not meeting their spend down for the year, or so now they have to pay a certain amount in order to keep up with the consistency of what they feel they need, so they drop out of counseling altogether? Well,
so often, we're living in those kinds of times, to be frank about it. Not just mental health, but, kids taking their meds, adults taking their meds, making decisions about, do I do meds or do I do food? you know, I mean, that's the reality of it. Everybody has to look at his or her situation separately. I would, before I dropped out, I would ask them, you know, can you help me? I really, use this terminology, my mental health is a priority. And if you're saying I can't come to you because of cost, help me find something else as a healthcare provider. Can you please help me with that? I wouldn't just walk out and not do something. Your mental health is your own priority at this moment on. There's somebody out there with a sliding scale, a free service, something whereby you could afford to continue to take care of your mental health.
Thank you all. I want to thank our panel and for their time and their wisdom and sharing all their resources. And right now, we're going to have Assistant Pastor Wilcoxon do our raffles. And thank you so much.
Awesome conversation. Thank you guys so much. We're going to transition right over to the raffle right now. We still have presentations online. So it's like 5 tickets in here. All right, so raffle. You guys really want to win this too. I saw the prizes. I got 823 800. Woo! I saw the prizes. You really want to win this. She gets a nice envelope. All right, we're going to have another lucky winner in the house today. And the lucky winning number is 823 802. 823 802. Uh-oh. Feel bad. They didn't win because they wasn't here. All right. Here's another lucky winning number. 823 798. Oh, do you like always win the raffles? Oh, this is an even better envelope. Oh. Congratulations to all the winners and the participants. Oh.
Of violence or diseases, you have to get it in between. You have to interrupt. And the interruption, once you interrupt it, yeah, that's right. So that's what we do in the streets. The problem with what's going on in the streets of Chicago is that a lot of people who are outreach workers or case workers, they're not following the scripts and the details when it comes to how you classify somebody as being a high-risk individual. So the person in the neighborhood is selling cigarettes, you're not high risk. The person that's known as being a gun violator, somebody that they're really go out and shoot and kill, you're supposed to have on your caseload. And so, no, we don't. There you go. It's just code switching. But you gotta. Yeah, I'll get it. It's just code switching. Do this. And so you interrupt it when you interrupt it. You interrupt it with new information. The stuff that y'all doing, that information then begins to change individual behavior. And then once we change the individual behavior, we can change the community norm. So that's why it's so important to get the information out there in the community. And this right here, so this is so good. So I gotta give y'all my number so y'all can contact me.
Name and number. We want you to be a speaker for our healthcare. You share what you shared today.
Okay.
Let us know what progress has been made, because that'll be a few months.
Okay.
Especially with the training,
they announced on the news for CPD, Chicago Police Department, that monies were being allocated for de-escalation training. I don't know where they are with the rest of these policing and communities and that
I
kind
don't
of
think they
thing.
can have them I don't think that they can have those trainings and those conversations with not have people like y'all in the room. My view on it is that I tell them all the time, I say, listen, people who, so I'm fighting to get the parole board to get, I'm fighting to get the parole board back in the state of Illinois because we haven't had one since 1978. We have not had a parole board since 1978. So the parole board in Illinois was dismantled because
Under
blacks.
whose leadership was that? Was that Daley? Was that the first
It could have
Daley?
been. It could have been David. We made the argument that you don't actually come up with parole. So that's the misinformation. What happens is that since in '78, the system was racist. They were letting out whites versus blacks. So the blacks complained about it. Instead of them fixing the system, they dismantled the whole thing. And so now our young black brothers,
He just in jail.
yeah, they doing. So I'm a returning citizen. I just come on after doing 30 years. I got at 16. I went to TAM Supermax when I was about 25. At the time they tell you your brain's not even fully developed.
Fully developed, your frontal lobe.
Yeah, so I'm isolated for like 12 years. And then for me, while I prioritized my life, my future, what it is that I wanted to do. And so I came home and I started making the push for it.
That's gonna be our new word, prioritize.
Yeah, you have to prioritize. I mean, I did it. Yes.
Yes.
What you said, I said all the time. One of y'all said it. Our people perish because of lack of knowledge. They don't know. So how can I fault you that you don't know? Let me inform you. Let me educate you. And so now you know. You can do better. I'm going to rob you. I tell people all the time, I'm going to rob you of the luxury of being ignorant. Because I'm going to give you the information that you need. I'm going to give it to you. So now you can't say, I don't know.
I'm gonna rob you. Oh
Yeah.
my God.
Because now you know. You can't come tell
Can't
me.
say I don't know.
How you don't know? You better know now. You got to know now. Because I'm going to educate you and make sure
About
that
to
you
know now.
So now you can't use that anymore. So now you have to prioritize what's important for you in your life. What is it you want to do in order to make your life better? And we have to be patient with each other. We have to be understanding, and we have to be disciplined. I read a book when I was incarcerated called "You Wonder Why the Blind Horse Sings." Now, I don't know why I picked up this book, but it was about an animal sanctuary, and it was a horse that was about to die. And the owners didn't want to kill the horse, so they gave the horse to the lady at the animal sanctuary, and the horse was going blind. So it was afraid. That's how I came up with the acronym for the word shame: self-help, self-hate affecting my existence.
I wrote
because
it
a lot
down.
of self-help affecting our existence, you can't get caught up on the word hate, because hate is also rooted in fear. So a lot of times when we're acting in self-hate that we may have, it's just really rooted in fear. We're fearful, or we don't know like who we really are. And so as I'm reading this book, it said that the horse was afraid, it didn't want to be around other animals, it started getting aggressive, and they didn't want to kill it. But I think it was a dog that got real friendly with the horse. Eventually the horse ended up maneuvering around the whole facility. Nobody did anything to it. And what I learned from it is that if we're patient, if we're understanding, and we create an atmosphere that is loving, that it can be conducive to produce the results that we want. And if we can do that with a horse, how come we can't do that with humans?
People.
So
You're saying something, Kevin.
you know what I mean?
Yes.
We have to do that. We have to be understanding, we have to be loving, we have to be patient, and we have to create that atmosphere.
And that works if with individuals that sometimes people are
Yeah.
Yeah.
I used to be the nursing coordinator for Cook County Jail for the Women's Division.
how you break through.
That's how you break that stigma too.
That's how you break through.
Like making them feel like, you're a human being. I'm
Yeah.
not sitting here all.
It took me a long time to come to that level of understanding because when I got locked up at 16,
What
Mom,
age were you when you got out?
I was 45. So I only been home 2 years, 4 months. Hmm. Because I realized that in order for you to move forward in life, you have to let go. So I looked at it like, you ever watch the sky? You ever watch the when they shoot into outer space? So when it shoots into outer space, what does it do once it reaches a certain altitude? It starts dropping stuff off.
All that stuff.
And the reason it's dropping that stuff off is because those things are not able to function in that orbit. And so certain things in life, you have to, when you're trying to ascend and grow, you have to drop those things off. It's going to bring you down. So you have to drop those things off. Now, it doesn't mean that I can come back down to earth to visit you. It just means that at this point in time in my life, I have to let it go. So what I did, I ran across this, and what did it for me was a word. I ran across a word when I was reading called introspective. And I kept running across it, but I just went over the word. I said, let me write this word down. And then when I read up the definition of introspective, it says contemplation of one's own thoughts. So I started thinking, like, what do I want my life to look like? Outside of this, I used to criticize a lot of the rappers and stuff, and I stayed and said that to fight the police. And I was looking one day and I was like, man, I got all these teeth marks on my knuckles. I've been sick for a year, and I'm sitting here criticizing.
Good afternoon, everyone. We are starting our part 2 of our Life Health Fair. This section, we will be talking about, why vitamin deficiency needs to be corrected with Dr. Kimberly Battle Miller. We will be speaking about breast health with Dr. Dorothy Anoyen, and being pre-diabetic again with Dr. Kimberly Battle Miller. And so if we are live, I would like to thank you ladies for joining us, and take it away. Thank you.
Yes, you can hear? Okay. Good morning, everyone. Pastor Green and Sister Jackie, I'd like to first say thank you. Thank you for this phenomenal opportunity to be able to speak to the community about important health issues. And I have a special thanks for the panel this morning. Sister Patsy is correct when she says that God has given wise counsel this morning, and that we just pray that everyone will take it to heart and will heed the recommendations that were given. As far as heart disease, like Nurse Jones said, please know your level, know the signs of heart attack, know also the signs of stroke, and respond. Don't just take it for granted or just brush it off. As Dr. Gregg said, please, men, know what your PSA level is. You should have an annual prostate check at the age that he recommended. Have your levels drawn and respond accordingly. Follow up with your physician or your healthcare provider. Get the care that you need. And then Sister Patsy, mental health, you are absolutely right on point. Before the pandemic, we saw levels increasing, mental health events increasing. But since the pandemic and during it, it's just increased exponentially. So as Sister Patsy advised, listen, respond. Don't be afraid to ask your girlfriend, your husband, your family, what's going on? How can I help? And more importantly, if you feel that you are not yourself, you are under extra stress, please get help for yourself. It's available. just seek it. The stigma is gone. We know now that we need help, and let's seek it. A healthy you will also impact your family. It'll impact your ability to work at home and at work. So just thank you this morning for those phenomenal speakers. I am going to jump right in and start sharing the presentation on vitamin D, because what we know is that vitamin D deficiency is linked to all of the diseases that were mentioned today, in addition to others. So let me share my screen. Dr. Anawina and I both have presentations so that you'll be able to just maintain the flow as we speak. Okay, let me put this in presentation mode. Dr. Anawina, can you see my screen? Yes, okay, so I'm gonna jump in. Why is vitamin D deficiency important, and why do we need to correct vitamin D deficiency? This is just a disclaimer, I'll go through that. So I'm gonna start with what is vitamin D and why it's important. Vitamin D is a prohormone, so it acts like a hormone in your body, and it helps you absorb calcium when you ingest food in your gut. About 80% of our vitamin D in our body comes from exposure to the sun. So we absorb the sun rays through our skin. It goes into our body, and both our liver and our kidney are involved in converting it to an active form of vitamin D in our body. So 80% comes from sun exposure. So number one, being exposed to the sun is important. About the other 20% comes from food and supplements. So foods and supplements. So in order for us to have a sufficient or healthy vitamin D level, not only do we need to have a healthy gut, we also need a healthy liver and healthy kidney. So individuals with chronic disease, we already know are at risk for being vitamin D deficient. Okay, God has given us vitamin D receptors in all of our cells throughout our entire body, which means it has an important role in keeping us well and healthy. It also means that if we're deficient in vitamin D, that it can make us unhealthy. So what we know from research and observation in the medical community is that an optimal vitamin D level can help protect against some cancers. There's some association with breast cancer, ovarian cancer, and as Dr. Gregg spoke of this morning, also with prostate cancer. Dr. Anawina will speak about breast health this afternoon. So just keep in mind the importance of making sure you're not vitamin D deficient when you're thinking about cancers and prevention and protection. Vitamin D is also important in bone health. We all know about vitamin D and strong bones, rickets, osteoporosis, but it goes beyond that. It's also important in brain health, which means your mental health, anxiety, depression, dementia. Vitamin D deficiency can amplify those. There's some association that it can make those worse or give you a predilection for those. So maintain a healthy vitamin D level to help protect your brain. Your heart health that Sister Jones spoke about this morning, muscle health, so those aches and pains, inflamed muscles, and important in this day and age, your immune health. We know right now that we're still in a pandemic, and we know from research that vitamin D can be protective against infection, both viral and bacteria. Coronavirus is a virus, so a lot of literature has come out during this pandemic to talk about the benefits of vitamin D in helping your immune system and protecting you if you're exposed to coronavirus. Most of the literature previously was done in influenza, but now they've looked quite a bit at coronavirus as well. So we know that it's good for your overall health. That means that lack of vitamin D is bad for your overall health. So being vitamin D deficient, and those same organs that it's protective in, it's harmful if you don't have vitamin D in those same organs. So there's an association with vitamin D deficiency, like I said, with heart disease, whether it's hypertension, coronary artery disease, the strokes, the heart attacks, with your autoimmune system, so diabetes, lupus, which we're common with, familiar with in the African American community, but also the rheumatoid arthritis and multiple sclerosis. The cognitive disorders, anxiety, depression that I mentioned, Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, there's an association with vitamin D deficiency, and if you improve your vitamin D level, sometimes it can slow the trajectory of these illnesses. I spoke about the cancers already. We talked about bone health, but also there's an association with vitamin D deficiency and obesity, the chronic fatigue that we're seeing all the time. And like I mentioned before, the muscle pain, and then even death with severe and chronic vitamin D deficiency. This slide just depicts what I said before, just, you know, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Vitamin D impacts your total body literally from head to toe. I want to just put a little pin and an extra star during this pandemic on the importance of vitamin D deficiency and having a healthy vitamin D level and optimizing your immune system. We know that vitamin D is necessary to have normal immune function, and that's whether we're talking about our T cells, our B cells, those cells that fight infection. Vitamin D is important in those cells being able to function normally. We know that vitamin D deficiency, or when your vitamin D level is low, that you do have reduced immunity and you can be predisposed to having viral and bacterial infections. So we always push to optimize your level, whether you're getting more sun exposure, you're taking in more vitamin D rich foods, or you're using supplements. It's important, especially during this pandemic, because it can help prevent infection. Some of the studies that they found in influenza and then during this pandemic, also in coronavirus, is that if you're exposed to the virus, if you have an optimal vitamin D level, it can decrease your chances of actually getting the actual infection. If you do happen to get infected, it can decrease how severe the illness becomes. So you can have a milder illness if you have an optimal vitamin D level that optimizes your immune function. But most importantly, it also decreases your risk of death. So how do we avoid vitamin D deficiency? Or the big question is, what puts us at risk for vitamin D deficiency? And the big one is, if 80% of your vitamin D comes from the sun, then poor sun exposure is one of the greatest risks of vitamin D deficiency. And all of us are impacted by that. This whole fear of being in the sun and skin cancer, has stopped a lot of people from being in the sun. But 15 to 30 minutes in the sun will not put you at risk for skin cancer, but it will increase your vitamin D level and can impact your overall health. You can apply sunscreens, but if you apply sunscreen, instead of just 15 minutes in the sun, you may have to do 30 to 45 minutes. The other thing that puts us at risk for the poor sun exposure is now, some cultures cover up a lot. In the winter, we cover up a lot. And just in general, sometimes we're wearing more clothes. We're spending more time indoors. We work long hours. We're inside in the air conditioner. We're more sedentary, sitting on the couch. And then that whole stay-at-home directive for the pandemic really had a negative impact on your vitamin D level. Could this have been associated with some of the mental health we've seen? Because vitamin D is important in your mental health and your brain health, maybe it is one of the components. So that's one of the things we look at correcting when somebody presents with mental health issues, when they present with dementia, when they present with cardiac disease, when they present with some of the OB/GYN disease. We use vitamin D and we check vitamin D levels, and then we try and optimize their level. We're also putting people on vitamin D before we start to see these symptoms. So we're getting less sun, so now we're having to supplement more. Other people at risk for vitamin D deficiency, the elderly, for similar reason, because they're inside facilities, so they're mostly homebound in their home or homebound in the facility, often due to debility and their inability to get around effectively. We see vitamin D levels decrease naturally as you get older, so it's a double whammy for the elderly. But even those who are moving around, um, uh, uh, are still at increased risk as they get older of having a lower vitamin D level. So it's important to check the level in your seniors as well. Remember I said the other 20% of vitamin D comes from food, the food we ingest. And if it's foods that are fortified or natural foods like fatty fishes, if we're not ingesting those, then that 20% of lacking vitamin D can impact our level. And because a lot of us are eating fast food diets, we're moving fast from the car to the job, into the house, we're just nutritionally depleted from vitamin D. And then one of the most important components that we speak about in our community is ethnicity. The darker your skin, the more difficulty you have absorbing the sun rays. So we have melanin in our skin. That's what gives us the color. It helps protect us from the harmful sun rays, but it also decreases our ability to absorb those sun rays and produce vitamin D. So the darker your skin tone, the more likely you are to be vitamin D deficient. We know in general that in the US population, about half of us are vitamin D deficient. That includes black, whites, Hispanics, all ethnicities. But in the black and brown community, that number is even higher. So 70 to 80% of blacks are known to be vitamin D deficient, similar in Hispanic and even higher in Native Americans. If you think about it, this is also the 3 ethnic groups that we also see a high rate of chronic diseases: diabetes, heart disease, obesity. So the question has been, is there an association with this extreme vitamin D deficiency and this chronic disease that we're seeing in these populations? Some studies have shown that yes, vitamin D is a huge component and that doctors shouldn't overlook it. And in black and brown individuals, your vitamin D level should be checked at least annually. And if you're low, you should be supplemented. This slide just depicts exactly what I said. The darker your skin, the harder it is to absorb sun rays, so you're more likely to be vitamin D deficient. During this pandemic, I talked to you about vitamin D and its impact on the immune system. We know that black and brown individuals are vitamin D deficient 80% of the time. So question came, the high death rate that we saw in the black and brown community, could vitamin D have an impact on those individuals? Is one of the components vitamin D deficiency that gives us a predilection towards a severe reaction because our immune system aren't optimized? So there were several studies that looked at this during the pandemic. We're still getting the results of those studies. But what a lot of the physicians knew is that we couldn't wait for the studies. We know that blacks, browns, vitamin D deficient 80% of the time. Let's optimize their levels. So we start recommending vitamin D for their overall health and to boost immune system. I work with Reverend Vines, Dr. Gaddy, who's a pharmacist, and a Dr. Sharif, who's an internal medicine doctor. We've looked at all of the research. We actually developed a community protocol to help try and correct vitamin D deficiency in the black and brown community. And we've seen some great impact for individuals who have become COVID-19 infected and their ability to get through a mild disease successfully with a higher dose of vitamin D3. So I say that as an aside, but talk to your doctor about that. So how do we correct vitamin D deficiency? I just told you the risk factors, so we just try and reverse those. Spend some time in the sun, about 10 to 15 minutes. Get as much as you can of your body exposed to the sun rays, and just absorb some sun and let your body do what God created it to do naturally and create some active vitamin D. Also, for that other 20%, just eat some foods that are high in vitamin D. Fishy fishes, the cod liver oils, salmon, sardines. I don't eat fish, so I have to find another way. So I use the fortified orange juice, and then there are some plant-based milk and dairy milk that's also fortified. Beef liver, eggs, the cereals that are fortified. Try and get the healthier cereals, not those that are packed in sugar. And then also speak to your doctor. Get your vitamin D level checked. Just like Joan talked about knowing your level, Dr. Greg talked about knowing your level. Know your vitamin D level. Get your level checked. And that'll give your doctor the best information that they can have in how to correct your vitamin D level. Also talk to your doctor about the dietary recommendations, because there are more. And then also talk to your doctor about any supplements and what he would recommend. And he'll give you a recommendation, but it's based on several factors. You want to know your level. He'll want to know your overall health, what your ethnicity is, and then other factors that put you at risk for vitamin D deficiency. Supplements, when we speak of supplement, there are two types of supplements. There is a vitamin D2. It used to be mostly prescription, but now we do have some plant-based over-the-counter D2 supplements that are effective. And then we also have vitamin D3 that you hear spoken about most often, because it is the most effective and it has the lowest risk of causing any toxicity. So with vitamin D3, your doctor will tell you what your dose should be. We know that safely. Most people, even those with some chronic illness, can take at least 4,000 international units a day. But what you want to do is make sure that you get your level at least above 30 to make it an adequate level. And then I'm talking about your blood level now, your vitamin D3 blood level. You want it above 30. 30 to 50 is adequate. But in this day and age, you want to be optimal, so shoot for a higher level, somewhere around 50 to 80 is what we recommend. So low vitamin D level is less than 30. You want to be above 30, but to be optimal, you want to be closer to 60 to 80. I just put this slide in to show you that there's multiple types of vitamin D as far as dosing is concerned. A good average dose is around 4,000 to 5,000 international units per day. So just each of the bottles will tell you what the dose is in the bottle. There's capsules, there's liquid. If you get a water-based liquid, it absorbs quickest and easiest. Otherwise, the other forms will work as well. And then just in correcting and the use of supplements, please always talk to your healthcare provider. Get your vitamin D level checked so you'll know where you're starting and know where you need to be. You should do it annually, or if your doctor puts you on a supplement, then they'll check your level a few months after. And then I just put this guide in here for recommended dose, but truly you should talk to your doctor. And just know I said an average dose is 4,000 to 5,000, but if you have chronic disease, obesity, if you're darker skinned, you may require a higher dose, and so you absolutely want to speak to your doctor about that. And this slide just summarizes all that was said. We know that there's a high vitamin D deficiency rate in the United States, even higher in African Americans, Hispanics, our Indian brothers and sisters. So get your level checked, get exposed to the sun, eat some vitamin D rich foods, protect yourself against chronic diseases, and just improve your overall health. And now I will close this presentation. We'll save questions to after Dr. Anawina speaks. And so to keep us on time, I am going to transition to not only my friend and colleague for many years, but she is also my doctor. She's the first one that put me on vitamin D some months ago. So I am going to share Dr. Anawina's presentation. I'll let her speak to you a little bit about herself. I'm going to stop sharing, and then I will share your presentation, Dr. Anawina. Let me get to slide 1. And one second. And then you can just tell me when you'd like for me to go to the next slide.
Okay, good morning. That was a wonderful talk. My name is Dr. Dorothy Anawina, and I'm a board certified obstetrician and gynecologist. I used to be local in Richard Park, but I had to move away. I do want to thank Pastor Green, Sister Jackie, and Dr. Miller for this opportunity. I also want to give a shout out to the other speakers for all that pertinent information they shared with us already. It's important to stay informed and be aware of these important social and health issues. Now, when I was informed that I only had 15 minutes to cover my topic on breast cancer, I knew I had to revamp and get rid of my usual outline that I normally use for my breast cancer lectures. I definitely did not want to use my allotted time and leave you alarmed with scary statistics, nor depress you with the recent findings that confirm that African American women are already at a disadvantage when it comes to the diagnosis of breast cancer. So my purpose for the next 14 minutes then became obvious. My aim is to arm you with knowledge that will empower you, that gives you a little bit more control when it comes to breast cancer. So let's get started. Second is skin cancer. Breast cancer is trying and succeeding in taking the lead as the most common cancer diagnosed in women in the US. As dismal as this sounds, the popularity of breast cancer has fortunately raised both awareness and research funding, which has created incredible advances in the diagnosis and treatment of this disease. That means good news. With all that said, breast cancer survival rates have increased and the number of deaths associated with this disease is steadily declining. This is largely due to earlier detection, better understanding of the disease, and a personalized approach to the new and improved treatment strategies. So if anything you get out of my very short spiel today is that there is hope. Next slide. So my focus during this talk will be defining what is breast cancer, who gets it, what are the risk factors, and what we can do to decrease our risk. Next slide. Obviously, breast cancer are abnormal cancer cells that originate in the breast of both men and women. In this picture, you notice there are various components or structures in a normal, healthy breast. The major structures on the breast, if you're looking at this image, the light purple regions are called lobules. These are where the glands that produce milk. Then there are ducts, D-U-C-T-S, which are canals or tunnels that bring the milk from the glands to the nipple area. Then you have the nipple and the areola, the dark area that immediately surrounds the nipple. And then the rest of the surrounding tissue is fatty tissue or connective tissue, which is called the stroma, which contains the blood and lymph vessels and basically supports the entire breast itself. Next slide. This slide lists the different types of breast cancers that exist, but by no means does it represent all the different types of breast cancers. You'll notice that in situ, the ductal carcinoma in situ and lobular carcinoma in situ, they're considered by many specialists as more of a non-invasive or pre-invasive breast cancer. Carcinoma in situ truly is defined as a group of abnormal cells that have not spread from the location where they were first formed, although they may later spread into normal surrounding tissue and become an invasive cancer. So it's probably safe for you to think of it as the earliest stage of breast cancer and is often referred to as stage 0. Women who are diagnosed at an early stage as in situ, such as DCIS, have a very good prognosis. 10 years after a DCIS diagnosis, 98 to 99% of women are still alive. DCIS is usually treated by lumpectomy, just removing the lump, not removing the entire breast, followed by radiation therapy. The goal is to prevent the cells from invading the surrounding tissue. Now, the most common type of breast cancer is the fourth one listed, which is the invasive infiltrating ductal carcinoma and comprises about 80% of all breast cancer cases. Now, the first type of breast cancer listed, the angiosarcoma, this is a cancer that actually starts in the lining of the blood and or lymph vessels located in the breast. Paget's disease, which is listed towards the bottom, is a breast cancer that starts in the nipple and the areola. So you see different structures of the breast can develop its own cancer, and the stage, size, and area of involvement will dictate the type of treatment that will be recommended by your team of specialists. Next slide. Let's turn our attention to risk factors. What are risk factors? It's anything that makes it more likely you'll get breast cancer in the future. But remember, having one or several risk factors doesn't mean you'll definitely develop breast cancer. And having absolutely no known risk factors besides having a breast does not guarantee that you'll never develop it either. Researchers have identified genetic, hormonal, lifestyle, and environmental factors that may increase your risk. So first, genetics. These are inherited changes, commonly referred to as mutations, that are passed through generations in a family. But only 5 to 10% of breast cancers are thought to be hereditary. The more common breast cancer genes are BRCA1 and BRCA2, BRCA1, BRCA2. You may have heard of those. There are other mutations, about 7 of them, that are less common but have been discovered that may also link to an increase of breast cancer. Family history, a first-degree relative, so that's either a mother, or father, sister, or brother, or a daughter or son, doubles your risk of developing breast cancer. Having 2 first-degree relatives increases the risk by 3-fold. Being female, there are 250,000 cases of breast cancer diagnosed in women every year in the United States. There's only 2,000 cases of breast cancer in men. Increasing age. The majority of breast cancer cases are diagnosed in women over 55. Personal history of abnormal breast conditions. This is usually found on a previous breast biopsy, something called atypical hyperplasia, or one of the carcinoma in situs, which can predispose you to developing more invasive breast cancers. A previous history of breast cancer, even being treated, unfortunately puts you at a higher risk of either recurrence or a different type of breast cancer in the same or the opposite breast. And also prolonged exposure to hormones and menstrual cycles, which also increases your risk. So starting your first period early, which is before the age of 12, or not starting menopause until much later, like after the age of 55. And now, next slide. Continuing with the risk factors, exposure to radiation. Radiation therapy, for example, is someone who may have been diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma before the age of 30, or a childhood cancer that was treated with radiation, or unfortunately at higher risk for breast cancer. Exposure to a drug, DES. This was used back in the day. That was way back in 1940 to 1971, so it's a drug that's not used anymore. But it was to prevent miscarriages. And it was a hormone that was given to moms and later found that either the mom or the offspring now had an increased risk for breast cancer. There are some reproductive factors that have an effect. So having your first child after age 30, or women who have never been pregnant or have never breastfed, unfortunately, are at higher risk of developing breast cancer. The use of postmenopausal hormone therapy. For those women who are prescribed hormone therapy for severe menopausal symptoms, unfortunately, a little bit higher risk due to being exposed to the hormones. And last but not least, drinking alcohol, more than 1 drink a day. 1 drink a day is equivalent to 12 ounces of beer, 5 ounces of wine, or a shot, which is 1.5 ounces of hard booze, substantially increases your risk for developing breast cancer. Next slide. So what to do? You want to discuss breast cancer screening and be aware of self-breast awareness. Symptoms to be concerned about: a lump that you see or feel, nipple discharge, especially if bloody, the presence of swelling, Skin changes noted on the breast, including rashes, enlarging redness areas, or bruising that you can't explain from trauma. Changes that involve dimpling or pulling of the skin or a newly inverted nipple. Now, don't ignore these symptoms, seek medical attention, and after seeing a professional, a decision will be made whether a mammogram, a breast ultrasound, or MRI, or all three is needed. And that's going to determine whether or not a biopsy or further testing may be necessary. For those women without any symptoms, limiting alcohol intake, women who have at least one alcoholic drink a day has a 7 to 10% increased risk. And women who have 2 to 3 drinks a day have a 20% higher risk. Limiting postmenopausal hormone use. If able, the smallest dose of hormones for the least amount of time is recommended. Your risk for breast cancer increases substantially after 4 years of use. Next slide. Maintaining a healthy diet. The Mediterranean diet, which includes olive oil, mixed nuts, plant-based foods, including fruits and vegetables, legumes like chickpeas, peanuts, and a variety of beans and peas, fish, chicken, and low-fat intake, highly protective against breast cancer. Exercise, not only for maintaining or losing weight, but it is not totally clear how regular physical activity reduces breast cancer risk, especially in women past menopause. It is thought that its direct effect is on body weight, inflammation, and hormone levels, and is quite protective. Adults are recommended to get 150 to 300 minutes of moderate intensity or 75 to 150 minutes of vigorous intensity each week. Getting or going over the upper limit of 300 minutes per week is ideal. And maintaining your weight. Excess weight definitely predisposes you to a higher risk of breast cancer. It's probably from the extra hormone, which is estrogen, that excessive fat tissue or adipose tissue produces. And finally, multiple studies have demonstrated that adequate doses of vitamin D is highly protective of breast cancer. Next slide. Hopefully, by knowing this information, it'll help prompt you to seek medical attention. There are programs available to help in obtaining low-cost or even free breast cancer screening exams and consultations. Even if you don't have symptoms or significant risk factors, taking steps at preventing or steps at early detection is important. Nowadays, the excuse of not having insurance isn't valid anymore. So now is the time to advocate for yourself, for a friend, or a family member. Use this information and make decisions about your body and your health. Next slide. Now, my final thoughts, especially since this is a health fair at a church, I can share these sentiments freely. Be knowledgeable. God likes us to have wisdom. Pray and know that God is always in control. And as Christians, we are already ahead of the game. We know and believe in a big God. By using your faith and prayers, you will make the right decision. Crush any fear and be bold and courageous as you move forward from here on. There, I'm done. Thank you for your time and attention.
Amen. Thank you, Dr. Anawina. And then we will proceed with our last presentation on prediabetes, and then we'll have a discussion panel with myself and Dr. Anawina. And Dr. Anawina will be able to join the discussion on prediabetes as well, because she's well versed in it. So let me stop sharing, and then I will share my screen again with the final presentation. Okay, Dr. Wiener, can you give me a thumbs up when you can see the presentation? Thumbs up, okay. Let's see, now it just dropped off my screen. Here we go. I'm gonna put it in presentation mode. Okay, so final presentation. Prediabetes, are also known as borderline diabetes, also extremely important in our communities. I'll start with what is diabetes so that you'll understand what prediabetes is. Diabetes, we hear it all the time, diabetes, sugar, is a disease that occurs when our blood glucose, also called blood sugar, when it's too high. Blood glucose, or our blood sugar, is our main source of energy, and it comes from the food that we eat. When we ingest food, after we digest it, insulin, which is a hormone and it's made by our pancreas, the insulin will help us um, absorb the glucose and send it into our cells where it can act as an energy for our cells to function. Sometimes the body doesn't make enough insulin, or it doesn't make any insulin at all, or the insulin that it is making isn't used properly. When that occurs, the glucose or the blood sugar will remain high, and it doesn't go into the cells where it can be effective, and it just stays high in our bloodstream. That's when you're considered to be diabetic. So a high blood sugar, because you're either not making enough insulin, you're not making any insulin, or the insulin that you are making, your body isn't using it correctly. The consequence of having a chronic high blood sugar is it can impact multiple organs, which I'll talk about. It can cause a lot of the chronic disease, problems with your eyes, problems with your heart, problems with your kidneys, and we'll go through those as we go forward. While there's no cure for diabetes, there are some steps that you can take to manage diabetes and help you stay healthier longer. The best thing you can do in some of the cases is to try and avoid being diabetic. So the type 2 diabetes that I'll speak about now. When we talk about type diabetes, there's more than 2 types, but the one that you hear about most frequently is type 1 and type 2. Type 1 diabetes, also called juvenile onset or insulin dependent, is when the body has completely stopped making insulin. That can occur young in life, or it can occur in young adults, but it can almost occur at any age in life, but we see it in children all the way up to adults. So they stop making insulin altogether. So if your body isn't making insulin, then you have to receive it externally, and those are the ones that you see having to give themselves